All right. Cool. All right. Nathan and Ryan, thank you for joining me. For those who don't know them, Nathan Sharp and Ryan Olson are the co-founders of Retro. And if you don't know Retro, you're missing out on the app that everybody's using because they're building the best place for friends and family to catch up. Because, at least in my opinion, social media in 2023 has become a lot more about the media and a lot less about the social. And you've got TikTok, of course. Even Facebook and Instagram these days are focused more on celebrities and media over friends. And again, speaking for myself, I miss the days when Instagram was about my friends and family first and Taylor Swift second, as amazing as she is. And that's what I love about Retro, which, by the way, is available in the iOS App Store today. You can go download it. But I think that's why you guys have captured a lot of hearts and minds in Silicon Valley, because we kind of need to bring back what was special about social back in the day when we all loved it. I can't be with my friends and family every day, but I want to keep up with their lives and I want to know how they're doing. And if Facebook and Instagram stop being the home for that, the need still remains. And I think there's a real gap there. And I think you two are the ones to figure that out. So, uh, Nathan and Ryan are both Instagram veterans. So we've been in the trenches together building products. I'm fortunate to have called them colleagues. They were instrumental, both of them, in building and growing Instagram stories, which I think may still be the fastest product to a billion users ever. So they really get the balance of engineering and design and psychology and A/B testing. And in Retro's case, a commitment to creating an experience that is a joy, not a habit. So that's how I think about Retro, but I'd rather hear about it in your own words. So maybe we start with you guys just giving a quick background on the company and its story, and then we'll go from there. Like, why'd you start it? What problems do you set out to solve? And of course, feel free to tell me if I got anything wrong in my intro.
No, that sounds great. And we're so excited to be here. It's good to be speaking with you about all this. Um, Ryan, I guess I can take this one.
Yeah.
Um, if I go back to the very beginning and kind of why we started this, a lot of times entrepreneurs start because they either have this idea that keeps them up all night and they just have this thing that they know has to come into existence and they can't really rest until it does. And then you have a group of people that usually start something not necessarily with an idea, but with a group of people that they know they could go into any area with. And I think the fun thing with Ryan and I is I feel like we kind of hit both of those. That's why planets really aligned for us. We started working together early at Instagram in 2016 on the project that became Instagram Stories. And so at that time, I feel like we got into this rhythm of things where we would a lot of times at work, after work, we went in this bar in the Mission in San Francisco called Lone Palm, and we talked a lot about like doing something together in the future. And that never really that conversation never really stopped. Like we were always kind of looking out for new and different ideas and things to work on. I think as we looked at that first project we worked on, Instagram Stories, one of the funny things about that project was that our favorite part of it was right before we launched to the public. And what was so magical about that time was that we had been working really intensely on this project that had been a bit of a roller coaster, if you remember, Kevin.
I do.
There are lots of ups and downs, and in that process, you'd formed like a lot of friendships with colleagues. They weren't just coworkers, but they were really your friends for this like really intense period of life. And that as people started using the product internally, these friends, you started to see all of these angles of their lives that you'd never seen before as they started to use Instagram Stories in that private build that was just among colleagues. And when we launched to the public, obviously it was wonderful to see the world use it. It was wonderful to see friends and family use it. And then, of course, it was wonderful to see people who had kind of a business reason to build an audience start using the product. But over time, we saw that not just stories, but more or less social media in general kind of went too far in the direction of people that were trying to build audiences. And so Ryan and I had this ongoing conversation about working together, and around this time last year really doubled down on the idea that we think that there's a real opening in the market for an app that's completely dedicated to sharing with your friends and family. And so that was really kind of the genesis of us coming together to start Lone Palm Labs, which is the parent company, and our first product being Retro, the product that's now dedicated to friends and family catching up together.
I like how you say your first product. I love the ambition. So let's nerd out for a little bit on social product stuff. So you're starting a brand new experience. You have a blank canvas. That's a really intimidating thing because there's 1,000 decisions you could make, different ways you approach the social graph, different design principles you could follow, mechanics, gimmicks you could play with. Like, how did you guys think about that? Did you start with a strong conception of what you wanted to build? So like, and write code and actually play with something? Were you debating verbally? Were you sketching? Like, what was that process like?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's intimidating, but it's also liberating. We have worked in social products for many years, and there were always these constraints, either because of how the product had evolved or, business considerations that we had to take into account. And it was really nice to actually have that blank canvas to kind of reset and really build the product that we want to use for ourselves. So we kind of just started simple, and we were able to challenge all these assumptions that had kind of been baked into products over the years. And it was awesome to just, reevaluate what's the right cadence for sharing. Is it daily? Is it weekly? And we learn by building. We build, we test, and we evaluate it on whether it's working for us and for our friends and family.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think I really learned from Kevin and Mikey at Instagram was that these decisions that you make, you don't make them in isolation, right? They have to all reinforce each other to end up with a consistent system, and also one that's simple enough that people have a conception in their heads of how it works. Like, where does this go? What's the, when I post, who can see it? What's the privacy? Like, it should all just kind of work in a way that I can reason about. Otherwise, it can be intimidating. It's like, these are really hard systems to get right. And so I'm curious, I mean, you guys have, the one in Retro, at least to me, feels really natural and really kind of, it's easy for me to post because of the principles that you've set up. So how long did it take to arrive there? Like, was your starting point something that kind of looked like Retro, or was it, completely different, like, bourbon to Instagram?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say like one of the biggest lessons that I learned from Instagram was this: do the simple thing first. That was something that was repeated all the time. And I feel like we've really tried to bring that to Retro. And so the Composer, we tried to make it as simple as possible, as comfortable as possible, to just pick photos from your camera roll and be able to share those to friends. We definitely did go through some iterations. Maybe Nathan, you want to talk to where we started there?
Yeah. It looked very similar, but there are some big kind of invisible system decisions, I think, that are pretty different from where we began in the beginning. We talked about how our mission is to build the very best place to stay caught up with family and friends. And that is kind of this macro mission, but it's so high level that it doesn't really get down to the nitty gritty of the problems that people face every day as they try to share with family and friends. And I think on that front, it's just that most people, there's this problem where most people have a group of people that they'd like to stay closer to. Problem number one. And problem number two is that most people have a lot of photos and videos already on their camera roll that would do a good job of staying closer to those families and friends. And that there's just not a good bridge between those two right now, that the apps that have traditionally been a good bridge between those have, again, gone in a slightly different direction. So I think one of the first questions that we asked ourselves, and something that's evolved a bit over time, is that we know from just past experiments in social that you need to build a product that's more or less used on a daily basis if you're going to be successful in staying top of mind for people to adopt an app, for people to get networks going, that type of thing. And so there was this high level decision of like, should we be encouraging people to share on a daily basis or on a weekly basis, or no encouragement at all, just like leave it entirely open-ended? And in the very beginning, we had this strong idea of participation. We wanted an app where people weren't just looking at content from other people, but that they were actually participating and sharing content themselves. And so in the beginning, we started experimenting with this, what we call like a post to view mechanic, where to encourage people to actually share and participate, they have to post a photo or video before they see others. And at first we were thinking that should be on a daily basis. But as we really got into it, part of our ethos is being really non-interruptive and building on top of behaviors that are already exist in your life. And what we notice is that most people don't have a photo and video every single day that they want to share. And that if we kind of created a constraint around that and nudged people to share on a daily basis, that for many people that feels like the treadmill is going just a little bit too fast. But we did notice that, you know, especially with the weekend included, the week is kind of this perfect unit. It's this, everybody operates on this cadence of life. And we got to this point where we said to ourselves that even if you don't have a photo or video that you've captured that you want to share to kind of remember something about that week, that we actually have this opinion as a product that you should try harder. You should actually take a photo or video, because, you know, life moves really fast. And if you don't step back and think about things and capture things, it might just pass you by. And I think that Ferris Bueller was the first person who said something like that. That was like one of the big things that changed in the product, where everything encourages you to share at least on a weekly basis, even though most people engage with the app on a daily basis.
Yeah, and one of the things that you've talked about is this idea of retro being a joy instead of a habit. Just kind of what you were saying there, but like I thought that was an interesting distinction also, because we've all worked at, you know, big scaled social platforms where there are these sort of stickiness mechanisms. You learn about notifications and the ways to get people coming back. And there are real trade-offs between saying it's a joy, not a habit. There, you know, you're saying things about what you'll do in terms of driving growth in the interest of building a healthier social product. But in fairness, you've also seen, you know, there have been things like Path that were amazing products, but didn't quite take off. So like, how do you guys think about that tension?
Yeah. I mean, I think the first thing you do is that you almost start off in the most idealistic position. So you have this idea of what's good for yourself, for your friends, for your family, and you almost always start there and see if that works first before questioning that decision. And so I think as we ever hit a fork in the road, we go with that first intuition, which is we think that this is going to be, we think this is the thing that's going to work, and it would be the thing that would be best for everyone in a very low pressure way before you start to experiment any other different way. I think that there are probably like 3 places in the app where we've made a decision that makes growth a little bit more slow or a little bit more difficult, and things that we're probably going to have to iterate around in the future as we think about reaching different people. I think the very first one is that it's an app to keep up with friends and family. And so it's a friend model versus a following model. And the thing that makes that difficult for an app like ours is that you grow by small community, small cluster of friends by small cluster of friends. And you don't have the benefit of going to like a giant influencer on one platform and working with them and inspiring them or paying them to port over some of their audience to another platform. Like that's not a tactic that's available to us because of our friend model. I think the second one is that you'll notice there are a lot of apps that engage in what we consider pretty annoying, like re-engagement notifications. Like sometimes you'll see like, hey, Kevin, we haven't seen you in 18 hours. Like, you sure you don't want to come back to our app? In our app today, what you see is that the only notifications that bring you back in are triggered by some sort of valuable organic action of a friend or a family. So you'll see that someone else has posted and you'll get that. And that's the thing that brings people back in. And then finally, and really importantly, I think that one of the ways we think consumer social went off the tracks a bit was with these visual indicators that drove comparison between people, but also between the popularity of one post versus another. And the moment we build an app where people start to say like, I don't have as many friends as this other person, or I don't get as many likes as this other person, or this post today didn't get as many likes as that post yesterday, is a moment we've kind of lost. Like, that's not the app we want to build. And so those are 3 things that like traditionally have been ways that other apps have either grown really quickly or provide like really powerful means of re-engaging people, but just don't fit with the ethos and the kind of position and the intention of retro.
I'd also say, like, I think some of the habit aspects of other social apps come really from their incentives and their business models, where if you have a ad model and it's based on impressions, then you're trying to keep people there for more time each day. And we would like to find a business model that really aligns with what our users want. And so that maybe you finish your content in retro and you feel really good about that, that you've caught up with your friends and you can put it down, for a few days. And we've actually solved a problem that you had, and we got out of your life and you can enjoy the world outside. So that's what we aspire to, at least.
Yeah. And I really respect it, and it comes with trade-offs, right? Like you can see the TikTok and everybody else just going wild, generally by doing a lot with influencers and helping content go viral, etc. As you guys are focused on building a really good, like, close-knit experience. As you think about the signal, like what tells you that now is the right time for that? What have you either heard from users or seen out in the world that's telling you like now is the time for something like that?
Yeah. Well, I think that from kind of just an observation standpoint, or like an almost intellectual standpoint about what's happening in social media, you can see these trends. It's almost an innovator's dilemma, where the entertainment use case among creators is just a bigger and more powerful business for anybody who's trying to fill an infinite feed with content or ads. And so you see almost every platform that had traditionally served friends really well in the past go really hard on that entertainment use case among creators. So you kind of know that and see that at an intellectual level. You can see that in some quantitative ways over time. I think the thing that beyond that made us start to feel really good about the system that we had landed on with Retro was that there was two constituencies that are usually really difficult to work with, that seemed to understand and Retro from the beginning, and it resonated with them from the beginning. And so I think those two groups were, like, number one, a group of friends that Ryan and I have that are kind of too cool for school and are really reluctant to try out and adopt a new app. They're like really high judgment, and you don't usually see them being the first movers to something new or going out on a limb to say, this is actually cool, I like this, because that in itself kind of makes you vulnerable to say, I like this, you should try it. And then the second group was a group of, like, actually family from Kentucky. Like, I have a lot of aunts in Kentucky, and these are people I've never seen share a single thing to any social platform ever. And they've joined Retro, and they very, like, dutifully post every single week. And I see, like, my cousins and my aunts and using this in ways where I've never seen anybody use this before. And the funny thing is, you can write that off. You can say, well, those are your family. Of course, they're doing that to support you. But I've had other startups, and I know that that they don't necessarily use your products just because they love you. So I think that there's something pretty magical there between those two. Like, in addition to seeing some of the what I would call, like, more academic trends that you can pretty objectively observe.
Yeah, so let's go in a different. Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I didn't know if Ryan had anything else there.
I'm good.
Okay, I was gonna say let's go in a little bit of a different direction. Let's rewind back to 2016 when we were at Instagram, because you both had critical roles there and you saw a lot. I think I saw somewhere Instagram Stories just had its 7th birthday, which I really can't believe. It does not feel like it was 7 years ago. But that means the statute of limitations on telling stories is now expired. So you get to tell us some stories about building stories. So, like, I'm curious, when you think back to those times, what are the memories that come up?
Yeah, I mean, I actually remember, at Facebook and Instagram, when there's a major project like this, they do these war rooms, which is just a room where everyone works together in. And our war room was located right behind the stage for this all hands, Facebook Live all hands. And Kevin was actually presenting Instagram stories to the company there. And I was just terrified. I was sitting in the room behind the stage, just so scared that the thing was going to crash. It wasn't going to work. And I think there was maybe a little glitch, but it actually worked pretty well. And it was a huge relief. And even through our launch, I was really, kind of concerned that this thing was going to just blow up in a bad way when it went out. I think when you build a product, you learn it so intimately that you see all the cracks and everything that's wrong with it. And it was such a pleasant surprise when it went out, and people were really complimentary of the polish and the craft that was in the product. And I still felt like, well, it's definitely not perfect. But that was a great moment to see it go out and see people really enjoy it and use it.
I think I will always remember that all hands, because I hadn't been at Instagram all that long, and Mark wants to talk about Instagram stories because we were close to release. We were like, was it that morning or the next day or something? It was launching. And Kevin Systrom was like, I don't want to work on a presentation. Like, Kevin, you go do it. So it was kind of my intro, like, to the company. And we were in building 16 or something, and we were going to give a live demo. And yeah, there was like this part at the beginning of the live demo, because I tried to surprise people with the demo, and like it didn't quite load at first. And I still remember, like, Mark is sitting there in the front row, and you've got, someone who you respect a great deal, who's like staring at you with his intensity. And we were just waiting for this thing to load, like, please God, please. And then it came in, it worked. We pulled off the demo. And like, I don't know, at least for myself, the thing I really remember, and I don't know that I have felt this to this degree on any other product that I've ever worked on, was just like, this thing's gonna work. Because we were using it internally, and we would go away for the weekend and come back with way more to talk about together, just as people, as friends, because of stories. We would go away, and like, I would see what you guys were doing on the weekends, and we'd come back, and like, we became better friends because of stories. And there was just such, like, you could just feel it as we built the product, that it was, I've never worked on something that I had more confidence in. And that is the feeling that that's the first thing that I think about when I think about stories back in the day. How about you, Nathan?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I guess there's lessons learned, but there's also the things that like really stick out to you in your memory. And so there's a ton of lessons learned. Maybe there's a story that fits on both. I think one lesson learned was that it's usually the core thing that matters most, obviously. But in the beginning, before you launch something, you always think like, maybe it's this small thing that's really going to tip it off and make it work. And I think for us with IG Stories, one of the things we thought is that we've got a really smooth kind of production consumption flow, like seeing photos and videos and stories is going to work really well. We have a good approach there, but our creative tools aren't rich enough. Like, we need something that like stands out that nobody else has ever done. And so we had this idea of the neon highlighter. I don't know if you remember that one, but it was like,
totally.
It was kind of it came late in the project. Like, the project was already well on its way. We already had a very set deadline that everything was racing toward. And I just remember that team, the Instagram Stories team that built and shipped it was tiny. And we had to go out and look for someone else that was going to help us build this neon highlighter. And so the first guy that came in was so funny. I think we called him he had this nickname, the Cheetah, because he was like such a fast engineer and he was kind of like he was a bit of a legend. And he came in and he came on super strong. He had a ton of Red Bull, and I feel like I didn't know anybody else that smoked on the team. And he was like chain smoking, like with Red Bull, like getting this neon highlighter out. And we were like, man, take it easy. And he ended up burning out like 3 days later. I don't know if maybe slept in those 3 days, but like totally burnt out. And so we had to go find someone else to come in and help us out with the highlighter. And that guy burnt out. Like he kind of hit a block and he was also working on another project, so had to roll off. And so we were really closing in on launch, and we weren't going to get this like beloved feature, the neon highlighter, out. And Mike Krieger came in to save the day, co-founder of Instagram, came in and coded the thing up, and we launched with a neon highlighter. I don't think it really mattered much in the end. But it was pretty, that story really sticks out to me as like such, it speaks to so many things about how it's the core thing that's most important, how usually the biggest projects that from the outside looks like you had an army of people working on them are usually just kind of like a small ragtag group of people internally. And then also like, of course, the fact that you have a co-founder who's so willing to jump in at any point, get their hands dirty is just amazing.
Yeah, I feel like for me, like as I've thought about leading engineering teams, Mike is definitely my top role model. Just the way that he was always with the team and was unafraid to jump in, be in the trenches. You know, he'd be reviewing code at 2 a.m. or whatever it took to get this out, and that's something that I've tried to carry with me and learn from.
Yeah, I feel like the best managers that I've ever worked for are the kinds of people who give you a lot of freedom. They're not micromanaging you. They're pushing ownership and accountability on you. But then when you need them, they can jump in, and when they jump in, you're like, oh damn, they're really good at this. And that is Mikey to a T.
Totally.
Okay, so like now kind of comparing to Facebook, I mean, one of the other things that we had when we were at Instagram and Facebook more broadly was this unparalleled experimentation infrastructure. I really don't think that anybody in the world has better tools on that front than Facebook. You could like deploy an experiment in the morning, get real-time data, get statistical significance in an hour because you had a huge user base, make a call, repeat the whole thing in the afternoon and deploy a second experiment and learn something. And it's such a huge advantage, I think, for Facebook and Instagram, although, we tended to be a little bit more hypothesis driven and measured, I think, on the Instagram side, but we still benefited from all that infra. And now you start Retro, you obviously don't have all of that. You also don't have a few billion people using your product yet. And so experimentation is much harder. Like, how do you guys think about, how do you understand what's working? Like, are you looking at data? Are you talking to users? Are you just, intuition and the way you feel yourselves? How are you doing that now? Because it's so different than before.
Yeah. Ryan, you want me to take this one?
Or
I mean, I think that there was a big distinction between the period before we had really a significant number of users on TestFlight, and then opening up to iOS has given us the ability to kind of look into data and start to see trends there. I think before we had any significant base to see any sort of significance from in the data, it was very much a question of kind of taste and experience. And it gets at the fact that with a small team like this, even though it's really hard to quantify taste, it's like such a subjective notion that it's so important that every employee, every person on the team has a strong sense of taste. And that's oftentimes the way that we tested things out. We would be really quick to ship it and put it in the build, the TestFlight build, and then we would sit on it for a few days. And it's funny because so many things that you now see in the app, we shipped it really quickly. And our first reaction to it was like, nah, it doesn't feel good. I don't like it. But we always had the discipline to say, let's sleep on it. Let's sleep on it and see if it feels good over the course of a few days. And, we'd come back into it 3, 4, 5 days into the future and then reassess. And that was our decision-making process. When we were just 2 people with some like friends on the outside giving us some input on things, we would just make it based on taste and intuition. And hopefully we've refined that taste and intuition over time because of our experience. I don't think we're not noobs to consumer social. So I think that is colored by a lot of what we've experienced in the past. I think now that we have a significant enough number of users to start to see trends in data, what it points to is usually a problem that we've anticipated in some way, but it means that we reprioritize what the solutions are for those. So a lot of times you can boil any problem down to kind of awareness or activation, engagement, retention, growth. And over time, that there's very clear and tried and true playbooks to improve on any one of those fronts. I think for us, when we launched, there's a world in which you can see it spreading really quickly via word of mouth, or via the invite flow in the app, or via export recaps to like other apps on the outside. But you don't really know what's going to work until you start to launch with a large enough number of users. And since we've launched, that's how we make decisions now. The data tells us like where the macro problems are, and then this like really long product roadmap that we've developed over time, but just not had the ability to execute anything but like the first 3 or 4 features and like what might be 50 features, is then reprioritized based on what we see the data telling us is the biggest problem.
One of the things that was pretty interesting about Instagram stories and kind of the way we approached that was, I would say we were pretty opinionated upfront about what it was going to be, and we really didn't A/B test it. I mean, maybe there was like a country or two that was held out for a week, but then it was kind of shipped to the world. And over time, a lot of people came in to kind of challenge assumptions that we had made and kind of backtest certain things, certain decisions, to see if they could optimize them better. And I was actually really surprised that, like, if you look at the product today, it's quite similar to what we shipped in 2016. And so that's kind of interesting that like that product intuition actually went quite far. I think when you're a product the size of Instagram, you can get a lot of value out of kind of eking out, you know, a 1% improvement here, or even a 0.1% improvement there. As a startup, you're more looking for like, you know, what's the 50% improvement? What's the 100% improvement? And I think your intuition goes a lot further there, and you don't need A/B testing quite as much.
Yeah. I still remember how much clarity it gave all of us when Kevin Systrom was like, nope, we're going to put the stories bar is going to be at the top of Instagram. I get that it'll have impacts on engagement, on revenue. I don't care. That's where it's going. We're going to ship like that, and you know, we'll iterate forward from there. Versus, I think a lot of other companies I've worked at in the past would have been like, well, we'll try it on the 3rd tab, and if people like it, then it'll do well there, and we'll maybe move it to the 2nd tab, and yeah. I think it would have failed if we'd done that. And it was having the courage to say, this is the future of the product. We're going to put it right front and center, and then we could build the rest of the, you know, so many other decisions that link from that. We could build on that sort of firm foundation. I think I've tried to take that as a lesson in a lot of things since then, because I think it's one of the central decisions that we made, really Kevin Systrom made at the time on stories. How about some war stories from the beginning of Retro? Like, people talk, you know, we talk a lot about making things scalable, right? And if you're building Instagram, before you build a small thing, you've got to make sure that it scales to a lot of people. But the early days of a startup are like doing things that don't scale. And you know, I know we have crazy stories from things in the early days at Twitter. What are you guys doing right now that doesn't scale?
Well, I think we'll probably find that out along the way. I mean, I'm hopeful that what we have will scale. Of course, yeah, we did have a moment in kind of the day that we launched the App Store where I got a few screenshots of some things that looked pretty broken, just because our service was scaling up, and as it like kind of sharded, it didn't handle that so gracefully. But yeah, I mean, I'm optimistic. I think it's really interesting to be starting this company in 2023 or 2022, and just the services that are out there that you can build on top of, like the infrastructure that you can get without having to build it yourself is really incredible today. And so we're leaning on that quite a bit.
Yeah, I think outside of infrastructure, the way that we collect qualitative user feedback will not scale. It's basically us. It's us getting emails and people saying, you know, I've thought a lot about Retro. I just keep thinking about it, and I want to tell you all about it. And some of it seems like way off base and like really far from where we expect to go. And some of it seems like on point, but we're doing like a lot of like Zoom phone calls and like coffee chats with people like that, which almost certainly won't scale with our time in the future. But I think at this point, it's so valuable to hear from people in their own words and their own voices. And like, to the extent you can like seeing them on Zoom or over coffee is really valuable at this point. So I think it'll always be valuable, but just like we said in our decision-making process a little bit earlier, I think that especially at this point, like qualitative feedback is crucial.
Yeah, and Ryan, you mentioned the launch a bit. So you guys had a killer launch. It seemed like everybody was talking about Retro. You got a whole bunch of positive stories, and you had all these, you know, fancy Silicon Valley people tweeting about you. And like I see them continuing to use Retro, which is awesome. I got like millions of reach outs from people, I feel like, when it launched, trying, you know, how do I get the app? You generate a lot of buzz. And I'm curious what you guys think what did you do right that made that happen that maybe others who are launching could learn from? And what would you do differently next time too? What did you not get right?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Whenever we open the app to the iOS App Store, we called it opening to the iOS App Store. We internally within the team, we didn't really talk about it as a launch because we just think we're going to keep launching to small community for like the next 2 years, basically. Like that's, as we talk about how we grow, we've been really influenced by a lot of the literature out there about the cold start problem. Andrew Chen has this book, and he really warns you about the big bang approach to launching something, especially it's a social network. Oftentimes what happens, like with Google Circles or whatever else, like you launch to too many people in the beginning that don't have the ability to create kind of organic connections or an organic vibe on the platform. And then you get these amazing vanity metrics from the beginning, but you end up having people burn off really, really quickly and never really establishing the deep roots they need to make the network go. Any sort of robust social network is actually just like a collection, this constellation of these tiny clusters of people that intensely use it among themselves. So when we think about that launch, we kind of talked earlier about like something that is strong enough that it gives us credibility. So we have kind of a few articles and a few people trusted voices coming out to speak to like what's strong and different about Retro, but that we kind of didn't want to go too big so that we attracted a lot of people who join in isolation and don't really have the ability to develop the deep roots on the network and burn off. And I think we did that right. I think we landed it in terms of getting those, getting people with trusted voices who had been organically using the product to come out and say, this is really refreshing. And that's what we'd wanted. Any lessons from that for like future entrepreneurs or how to do that? I think we spent a lot of time talking about our ethos and seeding the ethos of the product. That's really important to us. And whenever we launched, I think people were able to kind of find an interview here, find a link there that spoke to some of that ethos. And whenever they think about us or talk about us, they had this kind of framework already, and these like this vocabulary and the words and the phrases that we use to kind of speak to other people about. And so that helped out a lot. In terms of things that we would do differently, I mean, it's so fresh that it's kind of hard to know. I mean, I think that going out community to community, it was, I think we did the right thing by starting kind of with a small collection of people. I think that the only thing that I could see us being like, did we do that right or not well enough, is that we kind of see the relationship between retention and growth a little bit like riding a bicycle, that if you grow too slowly, you kind of fall over. If you go too fast, you might lose control, and like that's where you burn too many people off. So you've got to get really the right balance between growth and retention. And now that we've launched, like what you've got to make sure to do, even if you're starting small, is to continue growing momentum, like with those small people. So 10% week over week, like even if it's just a little momentum, keeping the momentum up in the network, so that you don't fall over like a bicycle.
The Nathan mentioning bicycle makes me think, so before we launched, or before we opened to the iOS App Store, we had wait lists on our website, and I was actually kind of reluctant to build this wait list, as I was like, no, who's going to want to sign up for a wait list? Like, do people do that? Nathan was like, oh no, we should have a wait list. So we built this wait list, very simple website. And I had made a push notification that it would send us anytime someone signed up. And in the beginning, you know, didn't really advertise the website. It was like a few push notifications a day. And there was a Saturday and I was out mountain biking. I crashed on my mountain bike. It was like a pretty intense crash. Went over the handlebars and went into the hospital to get like checked out and x-rayed. All of a sudden my phone just started blowing up with notifications. And it was just, I looked over and I had like 400 push notifications from Retro in like 20 minutes or something. And somebody had tweeted out about our wait list and a bunch of people had started signing up. So it was a cool moment. Like you never expect, you hope to have a moment like that, but you kind of don't want to let yourself expect it. And to turn that notification off because the volume was too high was a cool moment for us.
Yeah,
That's cool. And
so
go ahead.
Well, I think the kind of funny thing there, and maybe a lesson for other entrepreneurs too, is that the wait list is a pretty tired mechanism. I think people are kind of jaded by like, oh, you're like yet another app that has gated itself. So I have to sign up for a wait list and then not really sure when I'm going to gain access. So the reason the username thing was important to us is that we were like, we think we can give you some more value for being on the wait list. And for new social networks, a fun thing to do is like claim a name that you weren't ever early enough to get on another network. And so we allowed people on the wait list to go ahead and claim their username. And today we're not yet out on Android. We're working on Android very furiously right now. But if you're on Android and you have a username and you want to go ahead and claim it, you can go to the wait list, claim your username, and then when we launch on Android, it'll be yours. I think that was a pretty novel approach that users seem to appreciate.
Yeah, I like what you said too about being clear about the ethos and attracting people who believe what you believe. I think that's a really powerful way to make yourself stand out. And so kind of along those lines, if we move to talk about culture a little bit, I find company values fascinating. And I think this is something that Facebook did really well. Mark would always say that a good value is one that another completely sensible company could take exactly the opposite stance on. So like, have high integrity is a terrible cultural value because of course you should have high integrity. No one is going to disagree with that. It doesn't help you make decisions. Whereas like move fast and break things, I think was an all-time great company value in the early days of Facebook. It's controversial and it's maybe not right for Facebook now, which is why they moved on from it. But like 100 other companies would take the opposite side of that, like go slowly and get it right. But it gave Facebook and engineers on the teams permission to take risks and build a culture that just like shipped and iterated faster than anybody else. And they were willing to take the downsides of that. And I think that was a really important part of Facebook's success. So like, how do you guys look at values and culture for Retro? How proactive have you been about defining them versus kind of letting them emerge organically from the decisions and the way that you build, the way that you work?
Yeah, I can take this one. I think that I think we've been really deliberate since the very first days before really before we had a name for the company, before there was even a line of code written in terms of some of the principles and the values that we wanted to bring to the company and the product. In terms of some of those that we defined early on that I can imagine a smart person going either way on, we think that in terms of our ethos, that remembering and appreciating life is an active process. And what I mean by that is you can imagine somebody who building a product where everything happens automatically. Your memories are collected automatically, that like an AI is choosing moments and putting them together and even selecting the people that you share them to. And it's all very easy and a pretty passive process. I think as a company, we think that at least when it comes to catching up with family and friends, so much of the value that you get from a photo or video isn't the inherent entertainment content or in that photo or video. And if you didn't know this person, those photos and videos are oftentimes really boring. Like the 200th photo of a person's child that you don't know is boring. But if that's your sister, or that's your friend, or something behind that moment, the fact that they captured that moment, the fact that they chose to share that moment is what gives that photo meaning. And we think that's something that's important and different about Retro. You can probably see that throughout the app. I think another thing that we think a little bit about is, or that we think a lot about, I should say, that's in our ethos, is that apps should respect your intention and your attention. And this gets back to a little bit to what we were saying earlier about notifications and the type of content you come to see when you come into the app. I can imagine somebody saying it's okay in a social app is if you come in and you have to go through a few different roundabout ways to get to the thing you want, as long as the thing that you're seeing in that first place is important to our business or our company in general. And that's a slippery slope. You can justify so many things if you go through that route. So I think for us, like, we were most excited to build a company and a product that allows you to say, I want to keep up with my family and friends. And when you come into the app, that's exactly what you do. And that's the only thing that you do. And so I think that those two are really important. I think from a product standpoint, the three things that almost always come up in any decision we make are simplicity, comfort, and craft. And especially when it comes to comfort, there's decisions like, should likes be public or private? And the place where we've landed right now on them being private have everything to do with comfort, even though there's so many people saying, I want to see other people's likes. I want to see that there's like more life behind that one photo or video, and who else is liking this thing. So that's a really important value that we brought to the product.
One I'd add on the kind of more engineering side is I spoke to this a little bit before, but really focusing on doing the simple thing first and simplicity. And I think, I mean, that very much comes from my time at Instagram and from Mike and Kevin. And there was an interesting tension within Facebook and Instagram, because it seemed like on the Facebook side, there was more emphasis on building kind of complex engineering systems, and that was sort of respected and rewarded. Whereas on the Instagram side, there was a lot more respect for things that were simple and straightforward and kind of easy to understand. And so I've always gravitated towards more of the Instagram approach, and I think it pairs nicely with trying to keep the product simple as well.
Totally. So just a couple more. Let's talk about the future for a second. So fast forward 3 or 4 years from now, when I say Retro to a random person on the street, what's the first thing they think?
Isn't that the weekly photo dump app for your friends? I mean, I think they think it's chill, it's refreshing. Like, those are two of the words that we hear people say again and again about this app. It feels different. And I think more than anything, it's about friends. So I think that those will be the things that people will say about it. I do think people come to the app and they almost immediately grok that we've spent a lot of time thinking about how to make your experience and your photos and videos really beautiful for yourself and for other people. And so I think that they may also comment on that. I don't know, Ryan, what do you think? It's a good question.
A quick response, I'd say, like, that's where I see my friends, you know. That's what we aspire to, is people actually post there. People I know actually post there.
Yeah, keeping it nice and simple. So what are you excited about most right now? Like, when you wake up in the morning, what's the thing that you're excited about that gets you coming into work?
Yeah, I would say consumer social is so hard that it feels like a miracle every morning you wake up and you see that people, both that you know and that you don't know, posting to a social app. You know, I think for us, because we create a fresh start every week, I think that feeling is especially cute on Monday, where, you know, a lot of people are just seeing kind of a blank canvas and choose to come out and like basically take their first photo and share their first photo to Retro. That's what really gets me excited. I think the things that gets me excited about the future is like, if you've known us, so you know that we're obsessed with product and we're very product oriented people, and we just have like a lot of features, like basically 3 to 4 big features that we're grinding away on right now that we're super excited to bring to people in the next 3 to 6 months.
Anything you want to talk about, or do we have to wait and see?
Yeah, we can talk about them. That's fine. I mean, the first one, which is no surprise, is we want to build a really well-crafted Android app. And like, if you're building a product that's good for family and friends, it's no good if only your iPhone friends can join in on the fun there, you know? So it's basically the other half of the network. And that means that we can also do a full global rollout, where we're kind of holding off on going to Android heavy countries right now, because of no Android support. I think the other thing we think about a lot is the ability to continue sharing with small and different groups of friends. So we know that any app that has any success in the social front, the graph almost inherently becomes a little bit too big. Not so much that you just stop sharing altogether, but that you start to think about the Venn diagram of the different groups of friends in that graph. And so the things that you share over time end up being things that seem appropriate for those different groups. So we'd love to build a product that serves smaller groups of people much better. And I think finally, one thing that we also kind of love is we know that Retro is, for now, the app where people share among a smaller group of friends, and they still maintain a bigger group of friends and followers on other apps. And so if Retro is a place where you're building your life's retrospective, building just like a killer set of creative tools that make it really beautiful to recap the things that you've done on a weekly or a monthly basis, or just based on some sort of event, you know. So those are 3 things that I think that are most exciting to me right now.
I have
That's
to
awesome.
I have to give a shout out to Daniel Gretsch, who is an incredible Android engineer that joined us only like 3 weeks ago, and has just been totally crushing it on the Android app. So if you are on Android, you will get to appreciate his work soon. He's doing an awesome job.
Yeah.
Awesome. And so,
yeah, I was
go
gonna say,
ahead.
Daniel's the man responsible for like Android coming out this year versus next year.
That's awesome. Okay, so we'll wrap up now. We'll do one last quick set of questions. So we'll do kind of a lightning round. So I'll just ask you some questions, and you know, quick answers, whatever's top of mind. Don't think too much. You two are remote, right? You're not in the same place. Do you text or do you video chat?
Video chat.
Yeah. Well, it's all hours of the day, so there's a lot of text too.
Yes is the answer. All right, most surprising thing about running a startup relative to your previous jobs?
I'd say just a deep appreciation of having an awesome co-founder to go through the experience with. I mean, there's lots of ups, there's also downs, and being able to share it with Nathan it's been awesome.
Aw.
The feeling's mutual.
That's a great answer. All right, best TV show you've watched in the last 6 months?
Oh man.
I think you should leave. I love that show, and I was watching it again last night, the 3rd season.
I'm a pretty big Succession fan, so.
What would you say to somebody who's never tried Retro?
If you have a photo or a video on your phone today, you can start very easily. All you need is a 1 photo video on your phone to get started.
Done. All right. Twitter or Threads?
X.
Are you waiting for me?
I'm waiting for you to weigh in. Are you just
X today?
Yeah. And all right, last one. Oppenheimer or Barbie?
I haven't seen either. Embarrassingly, that's a startup life, maybe.
You're so boring. We haven't. Neither of us have seen either. It's been quite a bit of it's we've been in our opening to iOS mode. We haven't seen any movies. So
Yeah,
bored.
it's all good. It was secretly a
I,
test, and you passed.
I'm more I'm more excited to see Oppenheimer. I'll say that.
Yeah, awesome. Guys, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you've been so busy you haven't gone and seen a movie, and yet you spent an hour here with us. I really appreciate it. So good to catch up, and it's also just incredibly exciting what y'all are building. So thank you.
Yeah, so good to be here. This is awesome. Thanks for having us.
All right. Let me try and stop recording.